Right, good afternoon. I'm Hessam Taherian. Justin Hill was my PhD student, graduated just recently. And the topic of this talk is an iterative pricing control scheme for renewable integration in residential applications and the use of thermal energy storage. Just an outline of the presentation, we present the background, we talk about a little bit about the existing research, just showing a list actually, and then control strategy, description, modeling details, the results, and some tests that we did, and also conclusions. So, what was the idea behind this research? Is if you look at just what's happening in the US, I know in the US we are quite a bit behind Europe in forcing renewable energy, pushing renewable energy into the market. As you can see, the states with darker color are those who have some goals, and I guess the most aggressive one is Hawaii, with a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2045, which is very progressive for the US. I think Germany has a somewhat similar goal, if I'm not mistaken. And what is interesting to me is that all those states that are white, they don't have any goals for future energy, for renewable energy, and that should not be happening in my opinion. But some examples, more in my opinion, progressive states, New York 50% by 2030, which is right around the corner I think, and California 50% by 2030 again. As I mentioned, Hawaii has the most aggressive goal, which is 100% by 2045. I think that's by the force of nature. They don't have any. They see and feel the effect of climate change every day in their lives. They're losing business because of sea level rising, and tourists are looking into other places. I think in the future it will be, unless something dramatic happens, some areas of the US are in deep trouble right now, like south of state of Louisiana, New Orleans. Part of New Orleans is, after Hurricane Katrina, is still inhabitable. And a sad fact is that we live in Birmingham, Alabama, right there, and there was a train track that went from Florida and Georgia to Texas and all the way to New Mexico and Arizona. Now, after Hurricane Katrina, if you want to go to Houston, for example, by train, you have to travel up to Chicago and then back down to Houston, because they just decided that they can't repair and reinstall those train tracks, because it's going to happen again sooner or later. So it's a waste of money. So yeah, just a lot is happening with the climate. So sooner or later, renewable energy must become a significant part of power generation. So the threshold is less than 30%. Utility companies can deal with it. It's not critical. The critical point is above 30%. When it gets to 30%, then all types of issues that utility companies will need to deal with. Basically, utility companies would like a steady, predictable demand, so that they can plan ahead if whether they need additional power plants to be built. As we know, nuclear is really hard to get all the permits and licenses for. People, after what happened in Japan, people don't want it in their backyard. Nuclear power plant, coal is in trouble basically. And well, another very important issue with traditional central power station is the heat rejection. Back in 1970s and 60s and before that, they could reject to bodies of water like lakes and rivers and oceans and seas, but it's all taken, and also because of EPA regulations, they're not allowed to do that. So heat rejection is a big problem, even if they detect the need for additional capacity. The heat rejection problem is a big problem. So what makes it really difficult with renewable energy is this. The output is something like this. So try to figure out how to plan based on that generation from different stations. And also this side, the consumer energy consumption side, is kind of better for the utility companies to deal with. Their experience with this, it changes from house to house. But as you can see, there is some kind of pattern to it. There are peak hours, there are off-peak hours. Now try to match this with that. That is the biggest problem. Large-scale integration ideas, central generation, energy storage, very expensive. So when you have renewable generation, you have a goal of reaching more than 50% from renewable energy. Then the issue of predictability, how do you solve it? You have to have large storage capacity. So far, thermal storage is the second law of efficiency is not good at all. Battery, expensive, doesn't last that much, especially when you get to large scale battery storage. There are other systems like compressed air storage, requires a huge amount of space. And also if you want to store compressed air in places underground, in natural locations, situations, it is only possible in certain areas. You can't do it anywhere you want. So quite expensive, and technology is not there yet. So we and many other researchers even before us are working on demand response. So what is demand response? Before I get to that, is that, okay, you have renewable generation, you can't predict what happens, so some researchers are working on predictability of that. Hopefully an hour ahead, 15 minutes ahead is much better, but an hour ahead would be very good to utility companies. These are some notable existing research on this issue of demand response. So the things we need to address is that, so you want to generate electricity using renewable energy, then you have your base generation. When you try to, I mean, by you, I mean the utility company. When the utility company tries to calculate the cost to relate the cost to the consumer, the problem is they don't know. They know how much they can generate from coal or nuclear or other sources, hydro, whatever they have. But from solar, for example, or wind, they can't predict anything, so they can't put any price on it. It's like I promised to you, I'll give you 100 kilowatt hours of electricity from wind, and then the next day there's no wind at all. So I can't keep my promise. That's the biggest issue. So the idea is for the utility company to be able to send the price a day ahead. These are real-time pricing. It's available in the market right now in the US. There's a website, you can go there and, well, I don't know if it's available to the public, but you can go to a website and find out what the cost, the mass market cost to the utility companies of electricity. So there's a trade market between different power plants, different utility companies. In our region, the southeast of the US, the big, basically in many areas, the only utility company is the Southern Company that covers from part of Oklahoma and Texas all the way to part of Florida and Georgia, all the way almost from the mountain side of the US all the way to the East Coast, southern East Coast. So create that day ahead pricing which exists for traditional power generation, but it doesn't exist for renewable energy. So that's another area of research to be able to predict how much renewable energy will be available, I don't know, 15 minutes from now, an hour from now, to be able to predict the cost, and then send that rate to customers, and the customers, what we propose, home energy management, which is an electronic device that can decide based on the occupant's behavior. So the system will learn when you usually do your laundry, when you turn on your dishwasher, when you take a bath, for example, things like that, all the appliances. So the home energy management system will, based on the rates received from the utility company, will decide when to start each one. So it will, if you want to do a load of dishwashing, for example, every other day, so that home energy management will tell you that if you do your dishwashing, for example, at 9 p.m., between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., for example, you get a better price, all right? So it will spread out all the appliance usage and creates a load sheet for that day for that house. All the houses all together aggregated will go to the utility company. So they have a pattern of, okay, I have, for example, I don't know, 100,000 dishwashers running at this time, I have 50,000 running at that time, and then that will help the utility company to adjust the price because they're looking for profit, the consumer is looking to minimize the profit of the utility company by decreasing the cost of the bill, and that will be sent back and forth until it reaches a compromise so that the utility company can have profit and also the consumer can have some saving in energy bill. So control strategy, step number one, after building the sub-hourly 15-minute interval pricing schedule, send the information to homeowners home energy management system, and then home energy management system develops a schedule. This is an example, a table, for example, receives the cost like this. At 1 a.m., 5 cents, and then, for example, if you do it at 8 p.m., it's going to be 22 cents per kilowatt hour. And then it knows that it has these typical loads and it spreads them to different time schedules and tries to optimize the cost. And all that information from all different houses is supplied by a distribution station will be collected together and sent to the utility company, which will look something like that. That's for one home, and then maybe 10 homes in this model that we did. And then the utility aggregates the information and compares it to the real-time pricing and sends a new price schedule, price rate back to the houses, and that will be iterated back and forth between the units until an acceptable alignment of supply and demand are found. So the result of modeling is, well, this is the area that they come together, supply and demand, and that's a good compromise, and the model stops, and the utility has its schedule to work on, and also the home energy management system for different houses as the schedule based on the cost. So a new 15-minute rate will be sent, and then we added the energy storage. So again, predictability is a big issue like this. So whenever you can't compromise with the utility company, then what you do, you will store energy and use it, you will store energy off peak and use it sometime else that you need at the lower cost. There are different options for that storage. Some researchers are working on whole house energy storage, meaning that your house is a thermal mass. If you, for example, when the cost of energy is low, if you increase the temperature by 2 degrees in Fahrenheit or maybe 1 Celsius, nobody is going to be too uncomfortable, but you're storing energy in the house, so later you don't need to run your AC longer. The easiest storage system, inherent storage system in any house is the water heating system. You have a regular 50-gallon, 60 to 80-gallon hot water storage system. So we decided to run some tests based on adding some storage systems, and we avoided batteries. Batteries are easy to predict, but because of the cost, and also it's something that we have to add to the house. A thermal storage system, hot water system already exists in every house, so we use that. So the simulation model, we picked 10 homes. These are Department of Energy data collected based on different code years from 2006 to 2011. And the type of foundation, because it makes a big difference in the energy consumption. Slab on grade, most of them from 1 to 7. And then 8, 9, and 10 are crawl space type, because we wanted to have different energy use profile, especially for the air conditioning unit. Air conditioning unit cooling, especially in our area and southeast of the United States. It's cooling demand, humidity is high, so something about 30% of electricity consumption is for cooling. And also, one house is actually Justin's house that we modeled in Energy Plus in the studio, because he has ecobee and some energy monitoring system installed, so we could verify the simulation results. And this is the model of the house in Energy Plus. So I'm not going to go through the steps in modeling. There was a MATLAB code that runs a few routines, and when it reaches to, it calls other software like Energy Plus, Open Studio basically through Energy Plus, that runs the energy model for the house, and calculates the energy need for the house, and sends it back to the MATLAB that MATLAB code that will calculate the pricing and send it to the utility. And we have these two control strategies and compared them with the baseline and looked at different pricing schemes. Flat rate is when you have the contract between you and utility company is that 10 cents per kilowatt hour no matter how much you use and when you use it. That's the flat rate. Some countries, some places still use flat rates. The price is different, but flat rate is pretty simple. Then the original real-time pricing is that, again, depending on the region, you have some on-peak hour pricing, which is the highest maximum cost, and then off-peak hours. And these are different. Basically, they flip for summer and winter. Summer off-peak is different from winter off-peak, but each utility company in any region, they have their own on-peak and off-peak hours and pricing. So finally, the result would be the final real-time pricing, which will be agreed on between the utility company and the consumer. So as I explained, MATLAB scripts were written to calculate steps 1 to 3 and 5 to 7, and in between, Energy plus software from the Department of Energy. It's an open source energy modeling software, and that would calculate energy use hourly, actually 15-minute, not hourly, 15-minute in 15-minute time space, time step, the energy use of the house, and sends it to the utility company. So these are the modeling results to check the alignment, and this is for 1 day, and the black line is the energy generation for that day, which was a sunny day, because we have a somewhat sinusoidal peak in renewable energy generation. And as you can see, baseline, the pink line doesn't match the energy. So you have a high peak for baseline consumption here, where the electricity generation is the renewable generation is the lowest. They match here a little bit better, and also when you have the highest renewable generation, the pink line, which is the baseline, is relatively low. So there's a big mismatch between supply and demand. And model number 2, it's a little bit better. It's the red one, and the blue, as you can see, the peak is almost matched, and also as you can see, the solar energy generation, renewable generation is increasing here, and you can see that there are spikes in model 3. So model number 3 removes the mismatch, and as you can see from the percentages, correlation coefficient for baseline is only 11.5%. It was increased to 40%.
Hessam, could you move to conclusions fairly soon?
Sure.
So we've got 5 minutes. If you want to have some questions, I need to move to conclusions.
All right. So quickly, well, let me just show one slide that this is the cost of utility for these 10 houses. You can see depends on the house, the location, the size. Biggest reduction was about 6%, and average, the lowest is about 2.3%. And these are the test equipment for the lab test and the hot water storage system. So conclusions is that it can be done. There are some other issues like social issues. Some people don't like. Basically, this means if you tell the consumer that you need to give control of your appliances to the utility company, there will be resistance. They don't want to lose control. I don't want the utility company to poke data or receive data from my washing machine and tell my washing machine when to start, when to stop. But we think it's one of the ways, maybe some think that it's probably the only way you can integrate renewable energy at high levels, like 30% and higher, into the traditional electricity generation in a way that utility company doesn't go broke. They have to make profit. So more research in this area is needed. Real-time pricing. When you include renewable energy, you have to come up with new ways to be able to predict the actual pricing of electricity from the utility company, from the base generation and the renewable energy. And the utility company and the consumer can work on different rate structures. There are in our area right now for excluding commercial. Commercial has several different rate structures. Basically, it's a one-to-one negotiation between them because they're big consumers. But residential, there's only 2 rate structures. So maybe based on this research, some other rate structures can be negotiated between the utility and the residential. So we think that based on this modeling and this strategy, we can have a match between supply and demand.
Okay, thank you very much.